You know, I observed something about myself last year, and I discovered that most times, sometimes, let me say sometimes, when I'm working, when I'm writing code, or I'm solving a problem, or when I'm reading, right, I discovered that I just randomly pick up my phone in the middle of what I was doing. I just randomly pick up my phone, uh, you know, not because I had an emergency or I got a notification or I remember there was something very important I have to do. Maybe some I had to call someone. None of that, like nothing serious. But I just randomly pick up my phone. Like I would just be surfing, check through WhatsApp, check through social media, just surfing from one app to another, right? And I could literally do that for most times. I do that for like 15, 20 minutes before I call myself back to okay what I was doing, and I discovered that okay this interruption in my attention was actually happening more often. So that made me to begin to observe myself, right, and also kind of observe my surrounding. And then in my observation, I actually discovered that I was not alone in this, right? For example, most times when I'm in church, right, on Sunday when I'm in church, and when it's most times when it's about the time for the preacher to preach, I mean a 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes sermon. And then when I look at my surrounding, it's also before I even look at my surrounding, I still get sometimes I still get this nudge to just randomly pick up my phone and just check my phone, right? So I mean that's to me that's actually abnormal. Like it's like a reflex. Like there's something controlling me, right? So when I look at my surrounding, I actually discover that a couple of persons, at least a considerable number of persons, actually like that. You just see people randomly pick up their phone. I mean, in the middle of in the church service, people randomly pick up their phone and they just surfing the net. I mean, I've got a few persons watching YouTube videos, watching Instagram videos while in the middle of service. So these were some of the things I observed, and I also observed that okay, sometimes when I'm in other public spaces, like when I'm in a restaurant, when I'm in the bus, right, everybody is just kind of glued to their phone. And then most importantly, sometimes when I'm even in meetings, right, in the middle of meeting, it's so kind of bad that okay, people just randomly pick up their phone, and not because they had a call or stuff like that. So this from this my observation, I can see that, and I also spoke to a couple of friends, right? They observed this. They actually said, okay, they actually do that too sometimes. And then the funniest thing is, you know, the funniest thing is you just randomly pick up the phone, but by the time you realize you spent 20, 30 minutes on just doing random stuff on the phone. So I discovered that I just came to the conclusion, okay, this is actually a systemic issue. Right, this is a systemic issue. It's not only happening to me, right? It's happening to a lot of people. It's happening to a lot of people. And so fortunately, when I read this book, I got this book last year, Automating Humanity by Joe Toscano. Right. So and then I saw a particular concept. He discussed a particular concept called attention economy. So he talked about a particular concept called attention economy, and so that kind of opened my eyes to okay, what I was observing is actually something real. So and then from my research and from what I got in this book, I discovered that there was actually a psychologist, right, an economist that have predicted the particular scenario I am observing, right, the particular situation I am in and a lot of people are into. So there was someone that's actually predicted this as far back as 1971. So I mean, Albert Simon is the name of the economist. He's also a psychologist. So he wrote there's a particular article he wrote in 1971. The title of that article was I don't know if I can remember the title, the main title, but the title is something around scarcity of attention in an information-rich world. Yeah, something there. But I will check for the real title and probably put it in the description of this video. So Albert Simon, I wanted to say Albert Einstein. So Albert Simon wrote that article in 1971 So he described the title, the wrote the article in 1971. Just it was an observation he made, right? The scarcity of attention in an information-rich world, and then the whole idea in that article was basically what Albert Simon was describing was the fact that first he concluded or he regarded that age that time in 1971 as information rich age. And then one of the things that one of the first things that got me curious was, okay, if you could describe 1971 as an information rich age, then how will you describe our modern world of social media and all this kind of stuff? Obviously no brainer. We're in an age of information overload. That's just it. So back to what I was saying, the whole observation of Albert Simon in the article is the fact that in an information-rich world, a wealth of information actually leads to the death of that which information consumes, right? It leads to the scarcity of that which information consumes. And what does information consume? Information basically consumes the attention of its recipients, right? So which means a wealth of information actually creates a scarcity of attention. In fact, there's a psychologically, right? Attention is described as a cognitive process that involves the selective concentration of our mental efforts, of our mental resources on a particular item of information to the exclusion of other perceivable information. I think there's a particular theory called torchlight theory. Is it torchlight or flashlight? Let me check. Flashlight analogy. So flashlight analogy actually visualizes human attention in a way flashlight works, right? When in a dark room, right, and you point a flashlight, right, the part of that light becomes visible, whereby the other dark areas become invisible. So that's basically how the human attention works, right? When we focus our attention on a particular piece of information, other perceivable information surrounding us becomes invisible, right? So this is basically what attention is. But now when we're talking about attention economy, it basically means there's a transaction going on, there's a transaction involved. So attention economy in the age of social media, in the age of products, in the age of applications that we have nowadays, is basically a system, a mechanism whereby big tech companies are actually engineering their product to make users spend more time, and attention on their product. Like it's a transaction, right? It's a transaction. They build their product, they build the interfaces, the algorithms in such a way that people spend more time, give more attention to those products. There are a lot of engineering that goes that ensures that people actually spend more attention on products now, especially social media application. There's something called persuasive design. And persuasive design design involves using psychological principles, using behavioral science principles to, I don't want to use the word to manipulate, but to encourage users or to trigger users to take a particular course of action or to do something. Okay, look at notifications. Notification is a psychological engineering. It's not just an algorithm, because when people get notifications, there's something that triggers in our brain that let me check this thing. Right? Look at infinite scrolling, infinite content on social media applications. Right? These are behavioral psychology. These are behavioral sciences to get people to spend more time on the product. Look at another concept like these things are not just features. Look at autoplay. Right, on social media applications nowadays, we have Instagram, TikTok. Videos automatically play. When you watch one, the other ones automatically play. These are not just features. They are products of psychology and tech. They are products of psychology and engineering, right? To get more people used, to get people to stay glued to the product. You can see that in that case, when some videos automatically plays, right, you are not the one making decision. The users are not more the best people making decisions. It is the product, it is the algorithm that is making decisions for users. So these are the ways whereby these complaints are ensuring that people spend much time on these applications. People spend more time on their products, right? And this was what I observed when I was, when I, you know, when this thing was becoming an habit to me, right? I would just randomly pick up my phone. I discovered that okay, I was actually not making decision. Right? It's like there's something that's now, that's now gotten into me that is making these decisions. Right? So the way these companies benefit from this thing is that the more attention we give to these products, the more attention we give to these applications, right? The more engagement, like the more engagement we have on these applications, right? On social media nowadays, you can like, you can comment, you can reshare, you can do a lot of things. All these things are engagement, and this engagement translates to data. Like this engagement translates to data to these complaints, to massive data, and this massive data translates to advertising revenue, right? Because they'll be able to, by the time they know more about the users, by the time they have more data about users, they'll be able to sell more products, they'll be able to sell more data, to companies. In fact, we're in an age of we're in an age of surveillance capitalism. Surveillance capitalism is a system whereby companies now sell personal data of users. Companies now sell personal data of users for profit. So as I was saying, so the more data they have, the more advertising revenue, and the more advertising revenue, the more profit these companies make. That's why these companies always have billions, trillions of dollars in turnover every year, right? But where this thing gets interesting, or where I feel okay, we should now begin to get more conscious, is the fact that now our attention, these companies are doing everything it takes in their capacity. They are engineering their product, their interface, to get more people addicted to this product. This bad side, the negative externalities to this is that now these things are making profits for them, but to users, negative externalities to this attention that we're giving to this product is a whole lot of things, like sleep disorder. I personally suffer for sleep disorder, right? Because sometimes when I want to sometimes when I want to sleep, I naturally see that as the opportunity to scroll through social media, right? And then unfortunately 1 hour, 2 hours, right, I won't be able to sleep. And there are a lot of research that have gone into this, and people have complained of sleep disorder, right? And then we have apart from sleep disorder, we have depression. People compare social media lives nowadays. People compare themselves with their mates, all this kind of stuff. Another negative externality is postural deformities, right? Because people are glued to their phone nowadays. We are now having back problem, poor eyesight, and all those kind of stuff. And one important thing that even got me to this conversation is the fact that now this attention, these companies are making billions of dollars from users' attention, but at the cost of the very things that make us human. These are attentions that we are supposed to, as a normal user, are supposed to use to focus on doing productive works. These are attention we are supposed to use to to better our lives, right? But it's unfortunate nowadays that a lot of people spend hours on social media without focusing on without with the times that are supposed to dedicate to to their academic work, to build their professional life, to build their spirituality, to spend with friends and families. Like these are the times that we are investing, we are transacting to these companies, right? Without why getting negative effects, negative things back as a user. Why is attention valuable? You see, attention is valuable because now attention as humans is valuable. One thing you should first know is that attention is a scarce resource. As I said earlier, attention is a psychological resource, right? Now the fact that attention is a psychological resource, it is a scarce resource, because if it is not a scarce resource, companies will not be fighting for it. Companies nowadays are competing for this scarce resource called attention. Right? Everybody is optimizing their algorithms, they are optimizing their interfaces to ensure that people enjoy. They are optimizing their recommendation algorithms to ensure that people just stay glued to those platforms. Right? So attention is a scarce resource, and that is why in economics, anything that is scarce obviously means it is valuable. Right? So the way attention is valuable to to us as a user. Is the way attention is valuable to these companies, and these companies are doing everything it takes to get more people to to spend their attention on this platform. And the main reason why I'm bringing out this topic is to let us know that attention is one of the things that we have as humans and should not be traded poorly. The way these companies are deliberate in getting users' attention, right? All these features are not just features; they are a result of they are a result of psychology. They are a result of behavioral science. They are a lot of psychological engineering. So the way these companies are very intentional in getting users' attention, I feel this is the way we users should begin to be more intentional about who or what we give our attentions to, right? Because there has been psychological research conducted to, especially to the effect of context switching. Psychologically, there's literally this concept of multitasking. Right? Psychologically, is actually not really true, right? From the way we describe attention, when you focus your attention on something, all that perceived information goes into obscurity. Do we get now? So now the negative effects of always context switching, in fact, is what I observe in myself. By the time when I'm reading and then I pick up my phone, right? When I'm reading and then I pick up my phone and then through to social media, by the time I come back to the book I'm reading, I kind of lose train of thoughts, right? Or when I'm solving a problem, I kind of lose train of thought. I had to restart. So this constant context switching is actually destroying our cognitive. It's actually destroying our mental prowess, our mental ability, right? Because a lot of times to solve problems requires deep focus. To solve problems it requires concentration. So when we've trained our brain to just when I've trained our brain to for constant dopamine hits of social media, right? When we've trained our brain to pick information at the surface, right? Then it becomes difficult to actually focus, to do things that requires maximum focus, to do things that require focusing for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and that kind of stuff. That's one of the So that's the negative effect of selling our attention, aimlessly. We can't afford to be selling our attention aimlessly to these complaints. In fact, one of the major consequences of giving too much attention, right, or getting addicted to these social media platforms and then the technological products of nowadays is the fact that aside the fact that similar to the fact that we could lose our focus, right, we can no longer focus so much nowadays. It's the fact that we no longer enjoy boredom, and psychologically, boredom is one of the things that creates sharp mental memory, right? During a time of boredom, you can actually have the ability to think, right? It's like we are, it's not that I know much about neuroscience, right? But these are some of the things you can reason with, and then I've actually read. Is that when you are bored. In fact, some of the things I've actually experienced too, right? At times when you are bored, you have the ability to think clearly. You have the ability to, it's just good for our brain to be at rest sometimes, right? But one thing this social media algorithm does, as a technology is what I know. One thing it does is, this scrolling to social media, it's releasing the dopamine hits that all these things are giving us. This thing that's stimulating our brain, right? The artificial stimulations for our brain, right? All the dopamine hits, the artificial stimulations for our brain, and it's practically always keeping the brain in an active state, right? But for to have a sharp memory, to have the cognitive ability to solve problem, it is important that we embrace boredom. It's important that we have the ability to sit with something, to sit with information for long hours, right? So that's why all this context switching, watching 1 minute, all this watching 1 minute video and this kind of stuff are actually affecting our brain. So in conclusion, the essence of this conversation is not to it's not to demonize technology or to say or to paint technology in a bad way or to say we shouldn't use technology anymore. But the whole idea is we should begin to use technology intentionally and not automatically, right? These products are already been designed to control you. They have been designed to control users, but it is less for we users to know this and to begin to use technology intentionally and not automatically. So we should turn off unnecessary notifications, schedule social media use, right? Read books, go on a long walks, and spend hours doing something without getting interrupted with your phone or social media, because if attention is the currency of the information age, I think where we spend our attention will actually determines the quality of our lives. So yeah, let's take your attention back. See you in another video. Cheers.